post movie reviews and film commentary both here on this vidcast as well as on my website. I talk about films that I like, that I dislike, films I think are great, films I think are bad, and that fun little gray area where the movies are just sort of enjoyable. But there's also another category of movie criticism, if you want to call it, that I don't really engage in, but I thought I'd explore it a little bit in this video, and that is films that I've actually turned off. 'Cause I've been living life right like I could just die any minute. Going for a ride down the side. Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Berry. Welcome to the StudioJake vidcast where I talk about all things pop culture. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and if you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. If you want to support me in the work that I do, head on over to my website, studiojakemedia.substack.com, where you can subscribe at different tiers that unlock different perks, and it really helps me out and the work that I do, so thank you in advance. I don't often talk about films that I turn off because it's hard to do a complete review of a film if you haven't watched it, obviously. But I found these movies to be so horrible in different ways that I just turned them off. I had no desire to continue on with the narrative for whatever reason. Now, I'm not going to do a whole deep dive into these movies because obviously I didn't watch them completely, but I will share a little bit about the film, why I turned it off, and if it's necessary, why I think its position in cinema history is overstated. So without further ado, here are 5 films that I turned off. So up first we have Dogville. Now this is a film by Lars von Trier, who is a European filmmaker, and this was supposed to be an experimental film that he did. Now, Lars hates the United States of America. He has made this abundantly plain in interviews that he did, and Dogville is part 1 of a planned trilogy he was going to do. He did eventually make the sequel to this movie, which I've not even considered watching after this one, but he never did the third film. I believe it's called the America Land of Opportunity film. Now, this movie in particular was, for one thing, really poorly shot, and he kept saying it's an experimental film. I honestly think it's because he probably got this massive budget from the film studio, and then he just kind of fudged the numbers a little bit. But this movie, instead of filming it like on location or in a film studio, because they filmed it like on a sound stage, so it looks more like a play than a movie. The main character, Grace, played by Nicole Kidman, she's like on the run from something. She stumbles into this small town called Dogville, and the town proceeds to abuse her, knowing that she's on the run from something. They don't know what it is, and there's really a lot to be said here because the film is just so horrible. They put Grace through so much abuse, and I really think it's funny because he doesn't like America, though Lars has admitted he's never visited the United States. Now, I don't think you should go to a place necessarily to have a scene from it or even make it the location of your movie, but I think it helps. And in this case, he was trying to criticize America and American greed and whatnot. It's all this, but he filmed it in Europe with European and Australian actors. So it comes off as very disingenuous. He didn't even bother to try to make it seem American. Honestly, this film was just a total disaster from the moment I hit play. I think I got about maybe half an hour into it before I turned it off. Now, the acting was fine. Nicole Kidman is a very talented actress. I had nothing against her. From what I saw, she did a good job. But this movie, it's just all about pain and suffering. And another thing about Lars is he just makes sad adult films. I don't know why people laud him so much, with this, especially with his obsession with the techniques they use that he calls Dogma 95 or Dogma 95, whatever it is. It's where you're not supposed to use like stage lighting. You have to use natural lighting and sound equipment and stuff like that. Point is, to me, it just seems like he just makes sad adult films, and it doesn't have really anything to say, even though the director claims he does. So this next film gets so much adoration from filmmakers, from just generic cinephiles like myself, and from film historians, and I really don't know why. I think it's more about what happened to the director of this movie as opposed to the movie itself, because this movie is not that great. This is Salo or 120 Days of Sodom. So this movie is just a torture adult film, basically. But it follows four wealthy aristocrats in fascist Italy as the end of World War II comes down, the regime is crumbling around them, and so they decide to have just 120 days of just pure carnal enjoyment. They capture a bunch of young people and hires a bunch of, shall we say, ladies of the night and then thugs to just keep them in check. And then they put these poor children basically through an intense sort of cycle of violence, of harm. And I turned it off after the first circle. It's divided into three circles as a reference to Dante's Inferno. And I turned it off, I think, after the first one. This was had some of the most vile things presented on the screen just within that first section of the movie. And I will say it is shot very well. Director Passo Pasolini, he was very well known for his incredible camera work skills and the way he would shoot scenes. I can't deny that. But he always said prior to his demise that he was trying to make a statement about how just the wealthy subjugate the poor, which is kind of funny because Pasolini was very wealthy as a filmmaker. But I really think the reason this film gets so much attention, even though it's just nothing more than something that a famous adult film director would make, is because of what happened to Pasolini. So shortly after this movie had completed filming and it was in the process of being edited, some of the prints from it were stolen and Pasolini was offered basically a ransom for them. Well, he was found slain the next day when he went to recover the prints. A lot of people think it was retaliation for some of the topics within the movie. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I honestly think that is why this movie is so infamous, not because it's a good movie. And I'm not saying Pasolini is a terrible director, all of his movies are bad. I haven't seen enough of them to know this. The only reason I even watched this movie, despite its title, is because when I went to Lamar University, I took a film history class, and my professor just lauded this movie. He thought it was one of the greatest movies ever made. So after he did this lecture about it, I went and rented it. And I was so kind of embarrassed because I saw its rating. And at the time, I was still living with my mom and dad. They were at work, so I put it in. And like I said, I did not get past the first circle. I think I turned it off right after that. And I was like, who would want to watch this? This is horrible. And so, yeah, I ended up turning that one off. If you follow me on social media at all or even read my website articles, you know that I'm a big defender of Christian cinema. It tends to get criticized for being overly saccharine. I tend to defend it because I'm like, hey, they know their audience. A lot of them are made with TV movie quality and whatnot. But I tend to defend that. I'm like, hey, listen, it's just a sort of no different than a Hallmark film or a Lifetime movie, just with a Christian angle to it. And yeah, some of them can be really terrible, like this one I'm going to talk about. 2014's Left Behind. So this was a remake of a movie that came out in the early 2000s starring Kirk Cameron. This one stars Chad Michael Murray and Nicolas Cage. And basically, it's based on a novel by Jerry B. Jenkins and Tim LaHaye. And it's basically about the rapture, which in Christian theology is when Christ comes back and he takes all the Christians with him up to heaven. And so everyone else is left behind to endure the persecution of the Antichrist. And book series was hugely popular. And they had a trilogy of films, I believe, that cover just like half of it because the book series has something like 10 books. So the first film adapts the first book pretty well. Now, this remake, I turned it off not even because I disagreed with its take on eschatology, which I no longer agree with sort of the Tim LaHaye, Jerry B. Jenkins take on the end times, but I turned it off because it's just bad. Like the first trilogy had, like I said, that TV movie quality, kind of that Christian scare factors, like, oh, you don't want to be left behind. This was just bad. I think I turned it off when the rapture actually occurs. And it's a shame because it actually has a decent cast. Like I said, it has Nick Cage and Chad Michael Murray. I think they did do a sequel to it starring Kevin Sorbo, but I didn't even bother with that one. This was pretty bad. And like I said, I'm a defender of Christian cinema, not of all movies, but just sort of that industry in general. I cannot defend this. This was pretty terrible. This was just a bad movie. I didn't even waste my time on it. Fully, I should say. So before his Me Too scandal, James Franco was writing and directing a ton of films. Now, one thing about James Franco is he is a big reader, and a lot of his more, shall we say, B movies are based on novels he likes. And in this case, he did an adaptation of Child of God, which is sort of I don't want to say horror, even though some horrific things happen into it. It's more like a folk crime thriller. It's basically about this man who he gets rejected by his town and he's forced to live in the woods. And as he's living in the woods, he becomes more and more animalistic, and eventually he becomes a serial killer. The book is really good. Cormac McCarthy is a brilliant writer, and it was something that really stunned me as a reader. But like I said, I really like Cormac McCarthy and his works. However, this film by James Franco did not like it so much. It takes too long lingering on certain scenes, not enough time lingering on others. And I actually turned it off when the antagonist of the film, who I guess is also the main character, the one who's being isolated from his community, I actually turned it off when he makes his first slaying, shall we say. Not because that scene in particular horrified me, but the acting was really terrible. His first victim is a woman that he sees hitchhiking on the road, and she tries to get away from him. He chases her down, and she ends up losing her life as a result of this encounter. But the acting in this scene was so horrible, I just turned off the movie. And it's a shame because Child of God is a brilliant novel that needs a good film adaptation. James Franco, who's usually a decent director, even with his B movies, I was expecting more from him, and I was really let down by this. So last, but definitely not least, definitely least, I don't know. Anyway, Jupiter Ascending. Jupiter Ascending is a sci-fi action film starring Channing Tatum and Mila Kunis. Mila Kunis discovers that she's not actually a human, she's actually an alien, and she stands to inherit like a planet basically. And so there are certain alien forces that want to prevent her from being able to complete this contract. It was directed by the Wachowski siblings, I guess is the politically correct way to say who they are. And this was a failure. In Channing Tatum's character, he plays this alien bodyguard who's supposed to protect Mila Kunis's character. And I just have to say the acting in this was terrible. It was poorly paced. I turned it off the first sequence when Channing Tatum's character rescues Mila Kunis. It was so poorly shot, so poorly acted, and the special effects were super cheesy, which you expect high quality from the Wachowskis, right? Well, not so much in Jupiter Ascending, and that's why I turned it off. Just a total bad movie in general. Did not like it, did not enjoy it. And normally I like movies like Jupiter Ascending. I really enjoy the sci-fi genre, especially People on the Run and all this jazz. But this one just failed on every single level. It was just a bad movie, and I turned it off. I couldn't wait to turn off. I raced so hard for my remote whenever I got to the point where I was like, I'm out. I'm out. This is too terrible. Those are the 5 films that I turned off: Dogville, Salo, Left Behind, Child of God, and Jupiter Ascending. There's a few more, but those were the big 5 that stood out to me. If you would like me to cover more movies that I have turned off, let me know in the comment section below. And if you want me to expound on why I turned off these movies, like maybe you want me to do an individual commentary on each of these films, I may not do Salo, I'm going to be honest, just because that movie is so unpleasant. But any of the others, I would probably happily do a reason why I turned them off, like go into broader detail about it. And also let me know, what are movies that you turned off? I would love to hear movies that you thought were so terrible, I can't do this anymore. So let me know in the comment section below. But otherwise, I guess as a cinephile and a movie reviewer, you can't get through all of them. There are just too many movies in the world, some great, some good, some fun, and some bad. And then there are truly terrible ones in that 5th column that you can just not take anymore. And that's just the nature of the film industry. There's going to be something of everything, something for everyone, or something for no one. If you liked that video, be sure to give it a like, share it out to all your friends, leave me a comment on what you think, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. If you want to support me in the work that I do, head on over to my new website, studiojakemedia.substack.com, where you can subscribe at different tiers that unlock different perks. It really helps me out. If you want to support the work that I do, that is the best way to do it. Thank you in advance. On that same website, there's a conveniently titled Buy My Books section where you can buy one or all of my books. I have links all over the place, but they're all on Amazon, especially with Prime Day coming up. Be sure to pick up one or all four. Leave me a 5-star review. It really helps out small indie creators like myself. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.